I am so glad you're joining me tonight. I know it's different than we've usually done the past 10 seasons, but I promise you we're going to have fun. We're going to feed our brains, and we're going to hear from Emily Washines and Chuck Sams, which is what I'm really excited about. Sense of Place is a program of Mount Adams Institute. And if you don't know this organization, I hope that you will take a moment when we're done here and look into them, because they are doing something on a local and national level that's really making a difference. And that is why I'm here. My name's Sarah Fox. I'm the host and curator of the Sense of Place lectures. And if you're new to this program, welcome. Like I said, this is our 11th season. And as many of you know, the goal of Sense of Place is actually pretty simple. We want to connect people, which is you, through place and storytelling. Which means you might be wondering why we're here now doing this virtual presentation. And I can tell you that quite honestly, it's because of you. We asked you if we should go for it, and you said yes. What I heard and what you said was that regardless of the format, having Sense of Place would give us all a sense of continuity at a time that, frankly, that's a hard thing to find. When I look ahead at who we're going to hear from this season, and you can see them here on the screen, I am really excited, particularly because this season we are going to have a very important first, which is we will be recording every single lecture. We will be packaging them up and making them available online. And the reason this is so important is because it means that what we hear tonight and what we learn tonight doesn't end tonight, and it doesn't end with us. What we hear here tonight will get captured and shared to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And the reason that we're able to do that is one, the massive support that we've gotten from Mount Adams Institute, and also because of our sponsors. And I know that many of you are here in the audience tonight from that group, and I want to say thank you. As with so many things this season and this year, COVID sort of wreaked havoc on our production schedules. And the folks that you see here were able to get up, get going, and get on board early and quickly so that we could get this program started. And without them, we would be in a much different place. So thank you to them. I also wanted to say that if you're able to, and I know we're all in different positions right now, but if you are, I hope that after this is all done and you've heard from Chuck and Emily, that you take a moment, if you can, and consider making a contribution to the program. It's going to help us through the next 6 or 7 months. And it is no exaggeration when I say that the only way we can do this is with your support. So thank you, because of you, we're able to hear from Chuck and Emily tonight, and we're able to share their story, and the rest of the stories we'll hear in the coming months. Okay, let's do this. Tonight, we are so fortunate to have two very incredible leaders. I feel so lucky that they have been able to make the time to join us tonight. Emily Washines is enrolled in the Yakama Nation. She's a tribal member there. She also has a master's in public administration. She's worked in film, in writing. She does speaking engagements. She is an active board member at the Museum of Culture and Environment, the Artist Trust, and with Columbia River Keeper, who many of you know. On top of all of that, she speaks multiple native languages and is the parent to 3 children, one of which I think is turning 5 tomorrow. Next, we are going to have Chuck Sams joining us. He is the Deputy Executive Director for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. He's Cayuse, Walla Walla, Cocopah, and Yankton Sioux. I'm not even going to begin to list all of Chuck's experience, but I will tell you that some of it includes Environmental Health and Safety Officer for the Umatilla Reservation, Chairman to the Oregon Cultural Trust and the Columbia Land Trust, and he's also a veteran of the U.S. Navy, where he served as an intelligence specialist. I can tell you that what I know and have heard from Chuck, he is someone who has his finger on the pulse of the people and the community, and I'm excited to have him share some of that with us tonight. So the talk, I was really excited that we could have a chance to talk about a topic that is both current and takes into account history. And as many of you know, COVID-19 has had a disproportionate effect on Indigenous populations in the US. And tonight, Chuck and Emily are going to talk some about that, and they're going to talk some about the different responses that some of our local tribal nations have had to COVID. But they're also going to share some of the tribal history of dealing with pandemics. So often we, and I find myself as well using phrases like, this is such an unprecedented time. But when you really look at the history of it, there are many ways where it's not unprecedented. And Chuck and Emily are going to share some about that and how pandemics in the past have affected the tribes and how their response to them even plays into some of what they're doing today. And they're also going to share some of their personal experiences with us. Okay, thank you for your patience. We had a lot to get through to get this thing going. I encourage you to clap at home. Don't be afraid, and help me join me in welcoming Emily Washines and Chuck Sams to Sense of Place Season 11. Thanks, Emily and Chuck.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Elizabeth Woody. I am a tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Oregon. I'm also the executive director of the museum at Warm Springs. As the board member of Confluence, I am supporting their efforts and their mission to connect people to the history, living cultures, and ecology of the Columbia River system through Indigenous voices. You can find out more about Confluence Project at confluenceproject.org. As a tribal member at Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, the experiences we've had recently during the COVID-19 pandemic have been very intense and have been disruptive towards our cultural systems. It brings back to memory the stories my grandmother told me of being a young child and going through the Spanish flu and being the only survivor of her small family. Her grandmother cured her and kept her safe in isolation in a tule hut, but also gave her medicines and traditional foods to help her stay strong. So those memories are still in me, and I feel them when we isolate here at home. Funerals are different. We can't gather together to honor our loved ones as they go on. People cannot celebrate births and name givings as they used to. So it's been a very deeply felt. We have no new positive cases tested this last week. That's a major accomplishment. We've had 9 people we have lost, and even the people who have survived the COVID-19 will have to deal with it for quite a while as they recover. And here's our program. Thank you for joining us.
Nick Kalawat and I am Numa. And Ashwanasha Shashkalashquit Iwaya Kanashnak Nuisluma Tichamna Nihyawepum. Good evening, my friends and relatives. My name is Chuck Sams. My Indian name is Mockingbird with Big Heart. I'm come from the Confederated Tribes, the Umatilla Indian Reservation, which is the home of the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla people. And we live near the place of the Big Springs and the Quaking Aspen, just outside of what is present-day Pendleton, Oregon. I serve as the Deputy Executive Director of the tribe, and I'm the past incident commander for the tribe's COVID-19 response.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm glad to be here with you and for this event. My name is Emily Washines. I'm a Yakima tribal member with Cree and Skokomish lineage. I'm here today just as a tribal member, not in an official capacity. I'm streaming from the Yakima Reservation. I have taken a look at different historical aspects of this and everything to bring to the conversation today. And you can find me on nativefriends.com, social media, our website.
So we wanted to start off our conversation a little bit from a historical context. For tribes, the biggest thing that has ever really harmed us as a people has been epidemics and pandemics. For those of us who are from the Columbia Plateau, the Umatilla, Cayuse, Walla Walla, Yakima nations, their bands, our cousins at Warm Springs and Nez Perce, pandemics have been extremely detrimental to our people. We've lost between 95 to 98% of our population because of a series of pandemics that really began in the 1780s with the explorers that had come into the California territory. What we do know is the pandemic that first came through were more likely measles and mumps. They came in either through California, the Great Basin, or they could have came through Alaska down in the territory from Russian expedition. But either way, by the 1780s, they hit the Columbia Plateau, and they stayed in the Columbia Plateau off and on in 3 to 4 different waves between 1780 until the late 1860s. And in each of those waves, they had devastating effects on our tribal people. Matter of fact, much of our religion, the Washout religion that is practiced, or the Seven Drum religion that is practiced on the plateau, have some elements that have been heavily influenced by the pandemic. Examples of this is just how we treat our dead, how very carefully we do our dressings with those who pass, and the reverence we give to them. But we have selected certain people to be able to do that. A lot of people associate that mostly with just a religious practice, but it really stems out of the pandemic, in which we didn't want the disease to spread. And so we designated people in our communities who really had to take care of the bodies. It is no different today than what you have now in funeral homes and funeral directors who do, and morticians who do the same thing. So each culture has a different practice of that, but they are practices that are to provide the safety of the people. Among my people, there's an old saying that until you are healthy and happy, the people can't be healthy and happy. And these pandemics, because they're an invisible force, have such a great magnitude of death and destruction in them, it is really hard for us to be socially healthy and happy. Among the people, the Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla, when this current pandemic hit, there was an immediate reaction. Our tribe was one of the first tribes in the United States to be hit by it. One of our non-Indian staff contracted COVID-19 while out on an event, most likely at a basketball event. And he was a staff member of Wild Horse Resort and Casino. And that immediately put the Board of Trustees and our tribal community into a lockdown mode. We were very fortunate to have an emergency operating plan that looked at the historical context of what disease had done to our people. When we started building out our emergency operating plan in the 2000s, we were tasked with going and looking at historical records of the different types of emergencies we've experienced. Fire. What did fire look like? What does disease look like? What does it look like when your economic institutions may be shattered for whatever reason? Earthquakes. And so we took those lessons and we made sure that they were integrated into our emergency operating plan so that we could act swiftly. The tribal government also recognized that it was important to rely on expertise and not political mindsets in order to combat this disease. So the Board of Trustees set up an incident command that was made up primarily of just staff, with only one representative from the tribal government. And they charged that incident command with a large responsibility of dealing with this as a health issue and a community issue, and best how to protect the health and the community of the people, our economy, and then of course our natural resources. So since the beginning, because of the things that we'd learned in our past, we knew that we had to be strong and being able to fight this, because until we are all healthy and happy again, we can't make sure that the entire community is healthy and happy. Emily?
Thank you so much, Chuck, for explaining and listing so much of the detail out from historical to present day. I mean, being kind of on the front lines of so much of that is just helpful. And I actually have this sense of like, I don't know, I feel myself exhaling because I'm like, oh, Chuck's got it together for you until I'm feeling better about it. I mean, even though we're currently in it, you want to have that sense of relief as a fellow tribal member. You know, I missed going to Wild Horse. This is the longest it's ever been for us. But yeah, there's definitely some historical elements that are relevant to today's conversation. The point you brought up about funeral homes, I'm continually thinking about our tribal members that are working with the bodies and what knowledge has carried forward and who has been those knowledge holders and keepers of our tradition, and which is rooted in our survival. And, you know, to talk about these pandemics, it's really hard because I'm realizing how little we've actually talked in depth about the 1918 and how much it's important now to talk about and have conversations about this, have recorded conversations from natives hearing about our perspective and what's happening in real time. So I am going to pull I'm going to share screen real quick and in present mode. Let's see if I get this right. Okay. There is a really great resource that I saw online. It's by a master's thesis by Susan Margaret Mayer titled "The Four Pacific Northwest Reservations and Influenza Pandemic from 1918 to 1919." And, it was really a helpful reference or frame of mind. I don't know if Matilla's done this as well, as looking at historical contexts in terms of how many people had passed away. This study doesn't include Umatilla, so that's why I'm definitely offering that prompt and aspect for you. But, the study really looks from 1918 to 1919, and it had, 249 deaths over births during that year for Spokane, Nez Perce, Colville, and Yakima. And what we see is that, when you look at these numbers and you're like, okay, this is what we were looking at in the last pandemic. Is this what we have to prepare ourselves for this pandemic? 75 deaths at Colville, 46 at Yakima, large numbers at Nez Perce and Klamath. This is according to Robert Boyd's Demographic History of the 1990s. And, in 1919, the Office of Indian Affairs had said that there was so many people that were passing away, basically at a fatality rate of 11% for those natives living in Idaho. And in Washington, there was a mortality rate of 9%. And to, look at these rates and to think about these, it's not just numbers for us. I mean, it's also about who in these families. So, I might not be close to certain people. I might not have gone to all their birthdays and gone to all their things, but we see each other in the line and Safeway in the past. We've been at gatherings. There's continuously family connections that come into place with this, both historically and presently. So there's so many different families within tribes, and we know each other. So to see that there was a mortality rate of 9% is alarming, and we also look and see, like, is this the same rate that we expect today? But I don't want to just have it on a heavy note as well. I think Chuck brought in this aspect of of present day response, and being a part of a coronavirus response team within a tribe, I think, is a very important role. And I'm very happy to kind of be co-speaking with you on that. And I want to have you explain more about that role and, what you wish tribal members knew. For me, I also go back to my children and my youth. I kind of want to pause here because I feel like it's a little bit of a transition. So I'm gonna pause and I'll go back to this later, but I'll just give you a preview. These are the two pictures I'm gonna show. Those are the last two, but I want to pause there and just have you conversate with me real quick and sharing screen. So Chuck, how are tribes taking care of each other? Let's just lead there. How are tribes taking care of each other? I know you've mentioned in the past some of the work that's going on with Columbia River tribes and testing. Can you talk about that or share about that a little bit?
I think that's the important thing. The data that you presented that you have regarding the 1918 flu, we did also look at our own charts. And the issue was for us is we had to dig through not county records because we were not receiving any help from the county. You couldn't find records of the tribes with the state, and you couldn't find records with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The only records that we could find were with the Catholic Church and the Presbyterian Church. And those were very similar. What were the births and deaths during that time? And we've seen a very large death rate, mostly among children, which makes sense now when you go to several of our community cemeteries and you look between 1918 and 1919 and you see a number of children. So, I can see a generation lost in that. And I think that played heavily in our community being able to and wanting to react so quickly because we didn't know what this disease would do. And to that end, you talked about how, we miss out on those interactions. We do know that in 1918 that we didn't really slow down any of our traditional practices, whether that was going to salmon, going to the mountains for big game and for berries and for roots. And we are very social people. Our interconnection with all of our cousins on the plateau require us to travel and participate in those cultural events. That's how we intermarry and how we grow wealth and share wealth. And so we saw some and made some extrapolations that's how the disease continued to spread for so long, the flu, among our people. We were in a circular effect. Some of the harder decisions for our community to take when we enacted our emergency operating plan was restricting them travel. We were the first tribe to restrict travel for all staff and all community members to a 75-mile radius limit. Now, they were allowed to go and practice first foods because this disease hit in the spring. We still had people going out to go pick roots. We still had people going to go catch the salmon runs on the Columbia. But we made sure that they understood the restrictions that they had to stay within their family pods, which is very hard for us when you want to go and see extended family. You want to be with your friends and cousins on the Yakima. I grew up on the Big River fishing for my grandfather, and we were a mixture of folks who were from the Yakima and Warm Springs who all fished both on the Oregon and Washington side. And my sister, who continues to fish on the Big River, had to tell our extended relations and our kin, I can't fish next to you or beside you right now. I have to only fish within my immediate family. Those were hard decisions. To get to that point, we also had to come up with some images that would demonstrate to the tribal membership how devastating this could actually be. And I'm going to share my screen. And you should see a map that we updated initially daily. We're now updating it weekly. And this one is from October 9th. And you can clearly see the green outline is the lands that we ceded to the United States or our ceded territory. And then the lands beyond that, of course, butt up against our cousins, the Yakima, up to the northwest, down to the southwest, the Warm Springs, and out to the northeast, the Nez Perce. And then if you go further south to the southeast, of course, you're into Paiute territory. But we wanted our tribal membership to see the numbers in the different counties and compared to where we were and what that growing number was. It was important for us to illustrate clearly to the tribal membership that, travel beyond the 75 miles, travel beyond our ceded territories could have a devastating effect. And that, I have to say, was the hardest thing for the longest time for our tribal membership to understand because we're such a communal people. And so we had to look at other aspects within our community that would continue to present that. And what I really appreciated was our longhouse leaders who told us that there would come a time that we'd been told these stories before, that we had to be not selfish, but to be selfless. And some of those selfless acts may look selfish, i.e. in meaning that we have to stay among our only immediate family pod. We're not based on a nuclear family. We're based on an extended family and a kinship that has sustained us since time immemorial. And so I appreciate you talking about, how we're dealing with this now, how the Yakima Nation is dealing with it, and how we're seeing it across the plateau. Because there are many of us that want to go to Legends, as people who want to come to the Wild Horse Resort and Casino, who want to go to Clearwater at Nez Perce, and want to go down and participate in the powwows that are happening at Warm Springs. But right now, in order for us to be selfless, we need to be able to protect each and every one of us so that we can continue our way of life. And that's how we've been explaining it to our tribal membership.
I really appreciate that insight that you gave and sharing the current numbers. Umantilla's charting and numbers and sharing is something that I've referenced since March, before our tribe, Yakima began sharing. They're responding to so much and it's very limited and hard. And so we really appreciate our neighboring tribes in helping, gather data and share it out. I think we at Yakima are over 32 deaths related to coronavirus since March. We are, I've lost 2 uncles to coronavirus. I've lost my language teacher. There's just different people in the community that I know I'm not going to see anymore. And I think a hard conversation that we're also having in regarded to this whole pandemic is we're also seeing an increase in drug and alcohol related incidents and accidents or overdoses, as well as suicide increases. And so this aspect that you're talking about and bringing up with regards to the social dynamics, how do we, how am I in a store with my sister or my cousin and not able to hug them, not able to embrace them, not able to see them? I haven't been to the store that's down the road since March, which is crazy, but I know the social dynamic of it is so hard and emotionally tough that I don't know if they could not come up and embrace me. But I do think that there's some aspect to having, being very honest about that grief process, and sharing, I definitely am somebody that has a response to it. I talk to a professional about that every week. And sometimes I think there's a taboo with having, and I'm trying to think about the amount of people growing up that I saw that was like, hey, I'm in counseling, or hey, I talked to somebody because it's so tough. And I scramble for those examples. And so, I always want to bring that forward to people about, finding in ways to take care of yourself. And I appreciate you helping strengthen that message, because it's something that I have to talk to my children about. I have 3 kids, 11 and under, and they go through it, man. They've been seeing each other day in, day out. And I say, we have to take care of each other. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of each other. And I have to demonstrate that as a parent.
We did a couple of videos to demonstrate, to show how you can do social distancing. But, we're used to, my own youngest daughter, who is in 2nd grade, is used to spending time with her grandmother, but she can't right now because we don't know who's a carrier and who's not. And she's very sad. It's been 8 months of really not being able to be by her grandmother's side. And to help our tribal membership understand that, we did small videos with our katsas telling them, I still love you. There are different ways to stand between a screen door to be able to do the calls, and to teach our elders how to use FaceTime and videoing chats. But, we've also seen an increase of our tribal employees, our employee assistance program, and at the Yellow Hawk Health Center, where folks are asking for more counseling. And we've been able to use technology to an extent, but, people are missing that human contact that, I need to see and feel you in the same room to express the things that I'm going through. And I think that has been very hard on all of our community during this time of COVID.
I want to talk about that a little bit, about the aspect of connecting between 2 people and multi-generational, and how it connects to even something like cradle boards. We began this conversation talking about the historical aspects, and, I make cradle boards, and I was thinking about that teaching about how we put wild rose, that's the hoop traditionally, and the different teachings that come into play with regards to that. So when I had made a cradle board for my cousin, and I had brought it to a baby shower, which we have baby showers after the children are born. Traditionally, we wait until they're there here. And so she went in to get the baby, and she brought out the baby, and then she unwrapped one of the swaddles and put the baby in, and then swaddled it above or the reverse. And my aunt had looked at her and said, we don't mix those. The cover that you use that goes over the baby does not get swaddled with the baby. You don't change those. And that always stuck with me, because she had said, that's something that your Allah had said, which is our father's mother. And I was always like, why don't we mix it? Where did this come from? And now that we know what we know about pandemics and being transferred and mask use and having to put that immediately in the wash, and don't just go and rub it all over yourselves after you take it off. It's amazing about these traditions that get passed down in multi-generational, and how we don't always know the source. I'm wondering if any of that came up for you as well in your family.
Yeah, I did, and the idea my youngest brought her cradle board out the other day and wanted to talk about it. And we talked about how during a time of pandemic, this is why we raise you in a cradle board, to learn patience, to learn to sit still with yourself, to be with just yourself in this time. And I think that's helped with a number of our children who still miss their friends. She deeply misses her friends. But I think if we can use those lessons to teach them why we were bringing them up in a certain way, that they are for preservation of your life. These are lessons that have been taught for hundreds and thousands of years about how to be secure with yourself, first and foremost. And so I appreciate those lessons coming down and being brought back out, especially during the time of a pandemic. I think that I watched our community health nurses talk about that, especially to the children that are being born now, and how we want to make sure that they're washing things on a daily basis, that they're keeping their children clean, and that they're not exposing them to those types of risks, and that a cradle board is a very safe place in the house to keep a child and keep them safe when they're little.
I want to keep it on another inspirational moment or memory. So what's another inspirational moment or memory that you've seen either from teamwork or response?
What I've been most impressed with is our elected officials really wanting to understand and combat this in a way that didn't run after the almighty dollar. So much of what we've seen on the national level and somewhat at the state level, and I know I've seen it in Umatilla County, is this rush to reopen businesses back up. First and foremost, every tribe that I saw were one of the first to shut down their casino operations and all their enterprises, because they understood that health was the most important issue. Being able to rally around health, I think, has actually influenced our neighbors. At least on Umatilla County, we are now taking the lead in our county coalition that our mantra should be about first securing the health of the people first, followed by getting children back into school, and then third, reopening our economies fully. But first and foremost is making sure that the health is out there. And I have to say that I was pleased to see that among not only the political leadership, but the professional staff of the tribe who did that rally cry and made sure to shut operations down as quickly as possible in a number of areas in order to protect that health. I'm going to share a screen to show some of the statistics where we know when that didn't happen for us. You can see from this slide here, it is our COVID-19 testing and what we did here on the Umatilla Reservation starting in April and going through till the 1st of October. And you can see where there are rises, and there are a rise of both number of tests that we do, but also the positive cases. We know that those were spread at funerals, a little bit by the homeless population, which we haven't talked about yet. We have a very small homeless population, but because we have a homeless population, we had a spread among the few people who are homeless. And then late August, positive results were from family gatherings when we started to let our guard down because people really missed each other. And then we've seen this latest infection happen is also from some social gatherings. So, what I want to applaud, though, is that the majority of the time you'll see our numbers are down is because people aren't doing their normal social gathering. They are trying to take this as a health precaution and being very positive about it and protecting their family and protecting their tribe, quite honestly.
Yeah, the aspect of protecting family and protecting tribe, I was in a very, personally, I was in a very, research mode. I'm going to read every article that comes out about coronavirus. If it says tribes and coronavirus, I'm going to read it. I've read every single, at that point in I'd say late spring, I'd read every single post that Umatilla had posted related to coronavirus, as well as our tribe and any of the Northwest tribes. I felt so the more I research, the more I know, the more I'm going to feel calm. And that didn't really fully come. You just end up working yourself up. So for me, my, I had a niece that was born in Montana, on my husband's side, and they asked for a cradle board. And traditionally and culturally, when you make those things for our infants, you have to be in a really solid, calm, good place. You have to be in a prayerful place, and you have to be very careful. So we didn't go out to go shopping for any of this. So one of my kind of highlight moments is like, look, this is finally the moment I get to say, like, I am so glad I have this fabric stash stockpile because I can just look at what's around here, or it's a very limited trip if I need to, order something in curbside pickup. But I also saw how much this modeled for my children. My daughter, that's her dream, is to be a fashion designer. And she's been really sewing away. I think she made like 20 scrunchies in the past week. And she's teaching her younger sister, and so this aspect of like expression, or a fancier term like art therapy, this artistic expression in a pandemic is very interesting. My husband came up with the design for the earrings I'm wearing during this pandemic. And so I look to those moments. I look to those, where are people being inspired? How are they taking care of themselves, even with everything going on? And what are they creating? What are you making? I'd also love to hear from, the people that are tuning in that, how are your gardens? I love to see pictures of people's gardens, because I try really hard, but I like creators' garden. What's out there that I could go gather?
No, I think that is great. Yeah, being able to find out some self-expression during this time period. I was the nerd, so all the stuff that you read from the Umatellas early on, I was the incident commander gathering that data. But I'll tell you, it was not done out of a place of really wanting education. It was out of a place of fear at the time. My oldest daughter, is 20, and she attends college in Southern California. And when her college shut down, she got COVID-19 right before spring break in March. And as a parent, I woke up in the middle of the night and was the incident commander and started to get dressed. And my wife asked me where I was going. And I said, I'm going to go get my baby. And she had to tell me, you can't. You are responsible for staying here at home and taking care of your people here. She's under her best care. She's with her aunt now. You're going to have to write out the disease. And that was early, when we didn't know what the disease would do. I'm happy to report she bounced back from that, and we sent her to a couple specialists. And the specialist told us that probably what saved her is being 20, but more importantly, she was a college athlete. She plays collegiate soccer, and she had good, strong lung capacity going into it. But as you've seen, we've had so many people who are not faring well in that. But I told her to take that energy now that she has and be a voice for not only people, but for her friends and her college roommates. And she's done that. And I think she's been able to turn that into a very strong learning lesson, and being able to present that to folks as a whole on how to take care of yourself. And it goes back to, again, whether it's cradle boards or teaching our children how to wash their hands and take, cleansing. We are finally allowed, we had to shut off because we didn't know what sweat was doing. And, everyone wants to go sweat, and we do sweat in a communal fashion also. But we had to stop all sweating for a little while until we realized that we could probably still conduct family sweat, and people are still doing family sweats, but they have to be very clear that they're not having any of those symptoms before they go into the sweat, because again, it's cleaning your body, cleansing yourself, praying to your creator, helping to bring back what's good into the community and keeping it alive. And through creative expression, my wife is an artist. And so, yes, I have more art in my home office than I've had in years. I've actually, when I did go into the office, I've been taking and transferring some of it there. But it's good. I think that the creativity that comes out in people during this time period should be, I hope we see some of that, and from the viewers out there, and post what you're doing, whether it is gardening or home projects or crafts. I think that this is a good time to find that inner peace within yourself and expression.
Well, I also want to mention that, yes, support your Native artists. Because I think that when people see these scary statistics, they see these numbers, they see your nerd data, which I, very appreciate that reference point. There also seems to be this not knowing how to connect or talk to you. And I brought this up with my life coach. I was like, when I'm in meeting mode and it's about something that's completely unrelated to coronavirus, I just want to talk about that subject. I don't want to talk about anything else. I don't want to hear that they're sorry about anything, because it's so raw. Sometimes I forget, like, that somebody had passed, and, I keep having to remind myself because they're so high. And my therapist is like, well, I think people are just trying to connect with you and reach out. And I was like, well, do people start meetings saying, like, sorry about your divorce, like some other traumatic experience, like, hey, sorry about your divorce, and then now let's move on to, approving the minutes, like, so I do think there is this, where are the bridges that we can have with Native communities? And I do think, supporting Native artists, or engaging, or following social media are kind of those gateways. Having conversations and attending and listening to Natives talk about this process is also part of that. So I want to kind of turn this time to you to get your final thoughts on how are you taking care of your how are tribes taking care of each other, the land, our resources in this time? What else comes up?
So one of the things I think we wanted to talk about is about protection of natural resources. What I think that the world has experienced is less carbon output. And all around the world, we're seeing less carbon output. I'm hoping that this is a wake-up call to not only the United States. We left the Paris Accords. We need to re-engage in climate change initiatives. Our tribe is very excited about continuing our work on climate change adaptation, and has been working diligently during this time to do so. We had severe floods that came through the area in February. And those floods, though, opened up new waterways and new growth along the river basin, on the Umatilla River, and also along the Big River, that we want to take advantage of for salmon recovery. And so while this whole thing has been going on with the pandemic, we've still had intertribal agreements with the Yakima, with the Nez Perce, and the Warm Springs through Columbia River Tribal Fish Commission. And we've been doing a number of projects still out in the field. And so even though we've had to face this crisis, I think that we've been able still to continue to preserve and protect those resources that we find most important to us. The other is being able to share the information, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the nerdy stuff. So the tribe, we have done a number of things in order to make sure that information is accessible to the public on a regular basis. We've set up our COVID website that allows for anybody, not just tribal members, but for anyone in the communities to come and look at. And so if folks ever want to go to our tribal website, it is ctrcovid.info, and you will see what happens on a daily basis. Now, this information is 2 days old because we've had to shut our Indian Health Services clinic down for the past couple of days because we had an outbreak. And fortunately for us, our interagency agreements allowed for us to make sure our tribal members have access in the local town. But we are providing all this information up to date, and we make sure that it's also linked to our Yellowhawk COVID-19 webpage, which provides a plethora of resources. We have over 50 different slides that we want community members to use, whether it's our community or another tribal community. We want them to be able to take our resources and go ahead and put their own logos on that. Most of this has been vetted not only through the CDC, but also through Indian Health Services and through different types of health commissions. Some of it may vary depending on state, but the most important thing is making sure that we get good information out to all of our communities. I don't think, well, I know we don't want to see another pandemic again. I think that that's coming regardless of whether we want it or not. We don't control the natural world and the way diseases come or go. But what we can do is educate, inform, and protect as best as possible, because we've been here since time immemorial. We plan on being here until time ends. And we're only going to be able to do that by being able to not only protect our elders, but to protect our youth. And it is those of us that are in the middle, such as you, Emily, and I, who must be able to share that information as widely as possible, gather the good information, separate the bad information, and do the best we can as Natitite, as the people.
I appreciate that so much. As you were talking, I just, there's certain tribes that you can kind of tell have a certain flow of how they talk. And I'm just remembering that last July, I had just got over a broken foot, and I was at the powwow, but I wasn't able to dance because I was still healing. And I had just made this goal, like next year I'm going to dance at their powwow, at their commemoration. And obviously, you know, that celebration was canceled. So now I get another year to get trained up for it. But there's so many different messages that youth bring. I want to end with, you know, these youth, this aspect of having youth, and being aware of, you know, their role. You mentioned, you know, your own family's role with this. This is my niece, Hilany, my sister, Elisa's daughter, and she's dropping off something to my elderly parents, so her grandparents. And so even our children have a role as protectors in keeping our elders safe, is what she had posted on social media. So she's wearing a pufflapa. That's how we say it in our dialect. You can share your dialect if you want. And she has a mask, and she's wearing a shell dress and moccasins, and she has a little doll. And, you know, this is a little girl that was at her grandparents' house numerous times a week. She was, you know, watched by them, and now, you know, we haven't been inside their house at all. But, you know, there's this aspect of caring and coming together that happens, and it's very unique. You don't want to be, I couldn't predict the amount of support that comes through from different people. I have 4 stalks of celery in my fridge right now from drop-offs from 4 different people and places. Why they think I love celery so much, I do not know. But we're making it happen. I food prepped it. I put it in water. My dad is, you know, in his 70s, and he had gotten his flu shot a couple of days ago, and he sent me a text because he chose a Paw Patrol Band-Aid. And I have a 4-year-old son, and so he's trying to demonstrate, you know, and communicate with them in some way, much like what you had brought up earlier with the with video messages and kind of this laughter and bringing a little bit of fun to, you know, this time. We had also gotten a request to go and gather tules. This is something my daughters have done since they were very young. And because it was with somebody that was outside of our household, even though it was my sister, we still masked up, and we asked them if they would consider showing, you know, this 6 feet apart and demonstrating that you can go and gather and still be safe. I just want to allow some time for your thoughts on this too, Chuck.
I think that being able to safely practice our traditional and our treaty rights is an important aspect, even during this time of COVID. Being able to go gather tules, being able to go up in the mountains to hunt a big game, being able to go to the big river to fish are all important aspects, because that's what makes us who we are. We're made up of the land. We're made up of this earth. My skin is the hide of the elk. My vision comes from eagle. My hearing comes from the owl. All of those things have to be passed on to our children so that they can continue to protect and preserve our natural world, because it's not only for them, it's for their children and their children's children. And even during this time of pandemic, those lessons have to continue and carry on. And I'm very proud to see and happy to see that you and your sister are continuing those traditions among the people of the Yakima. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and my daughter's names are Zora and Alice.
Thank you, Chuck and Emily. Thank you so much. Thank you, Zora and Alice, as well. This is where we get to transition from having the conversation between Chuck and Emily to bringing all of you who've joined us virtually into the conversation. I've been seeing some great questions pop up in the Q&A. And so we're going to bring Chuck and Emily on, and I'll ask some of those questions and some that I have myself. And as we go, if you have a question, don't hesitate to add it in there yourself. Hi, Emily. So one of the things that we heard both of you guys talk about, but we also got a question about it from Mitch Hicks over at CritFic, was talking some about this history of blankets and goods being purposely contaminated with diseases and then distributed to an indigenous people. and how that plays out now where, the Indian Health Services, for example, struggling to get trust just to do some of the testing. Maybe if you could talk some about the history, but also what are some of the things that you guys have found have been the most productive in instilling trust with tribal populations around COVID testing?
So I'll start out. I'm going to hit, because I saw one of the other questions was about smallpox. So smallpox really came into the Pacific Northwest around 1775 by some British sailors who would come along the coast to trade with coastal tribes. And part of that initial trade was blankets, and smallpox was in the blankets. So that was an inadvertent spreading of the disease between 1775 to the early 1780s. But we also have some anecdotal and some evidence that shows that there was some trade done by Indian agents, by the government, where smallpox blankets and other diseases were infected in those blankets that they were handing out to tribal members. The Whitmans, most people call that the Whitman Massacre. We call it Judgment Day. It was passing of a judgment on the Whitmans, who were responsible for trying to cure us from smallpox and measles. And the doctor wasn't able to do that. And so, that mistrust comes very clearly from the medical profession. Among our own people, it has always been malpractice. If you couldn't get somebody and cure somebody, you would have to pay with up to your life with that. And that's what happened to the Whitmans. And it's still that a strong concern that when we try to build our relationship with the health professions is that they have to be able to demonstrate to us that they're committed to helping us get back to a much more full and healthy state. And we're still combating that. And it's always a pleasure to work with Mitch and the crew on the Columbia River enforcement because they have to build that relationship on a daily basis to ensure that we're providing safe havens and safe places for our tribal members to continue to fish. And so I do want to give a shout out to Columbia River Tribal Fish Commission and their work in getting a mobile testing unit, working to get mobile testing unit and getting testing on the Columbia River. But that was probably the biggest thing in order for us to show and build trust on the Umatilla Reservation was getting enough testing supplies. Today, we held a community-wide testing event, which meant anybody living within the reservation, anybody employed by the tribe, Indian or non-Indian alike, was able to go get a free COVID test today. And that way we can help people understand whether they thought they have it or don't have it, to help them overcome any fears and to build that trust that we are here to protect their health.
One of the things, Chuck, it sounds like from talking with you and hearing also from Emily is that Umatilla in particular, you had a lot of things in place before all this happened that allowed you to quickly do emergency operating plan and get up to speed and then push out that information. What is it that you feel like helped you have that in place before we got here?
Well, and again, it came out of a place of fear, both from the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which, affects us, the Yakima, the Nez Perce, the Warm Springs, the Umatilla, along with when the old Army Chemical Depot was in place at the Umatilla, just outside of the town of Hermiston. And so we started developing emergency operating plans in the mid-90s, culminating with a comprehensive emergency operating plan in 2014 and 2016. And by going out and researching and accumulating all the data points regarding everything, as I said earlier, from forest fires to pandemics, we had a system already in place that allowed us to quickly activate all the appropriate staff across our organization, to include our enterprises, to form an operations team that could be nimble enough and quick enough to respond to this pandemic. I appreciated the amount of knowledge and experience that came to the table. And again, the political leadership taking a step back and allowing professional staff to step in and make some of the hard decisions for the community.
We just got a question asked that can be for either of you that looks at what's the economic impact that you've seen in various tribal communities?
Well, I mean, you have casinos that were shut down for a number of months just for safety precautions. And, right now they're operating at limited capacity for Yakima Nation. So that definitely is something that we're seeing impacting our tribe, because that's a source that supports our elders as they get supplemental funds from that, as well as our youth that are in schools. There's different events and things and businesses, of course, that come into play with that as well. We saw the impacts early in December just with shipping. My husband does a lot of business, Chuck's wife as well as an artist. And we saw that impact early. And I imagine a lot of different tribes slowly began to see the impacts worldwide, shipping being one of them.
You talked, Emily, about some of the changes you've seen that have come about because of this, and in particular, some of the creative changes. If you were to look a year from now, do you think any of that will still be in place? What changes are going to persist? Maybe hopeful changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's this big word called resiliency that I think if I were to go and talk to like 100 different tribal members social distancely about that word, I don't know what their response would be, or even elders, like resiliency, what's that? But I think it's really coming full circle with coming to terms with what had happened in the past and how maybe we have carried these teachings unknowingly sometimes. You know, when I was watching the tape back through, I kept seeing like I smile and laugh a lot. And I'm just like, this is such a serious topic. Why am I coming across like I'm having some great time? But I think it's just, you have a sense of humor that's in Native communities, no matter the situation. And I really think that we see resilience being built amongst ourselves. We see it in our children. We see these finer tuned skill sets being carved out and grown, you know, becoming more efficient, figuring things out will definitely come. You know, last night I found out one of my classmates had passed away. I cried myself to sleep. I knew I had stuff I had to get done today, and it all, well, I'd say like 80% of it got done. And I'm definitely going to carry that through. And because my kids all have a front row seat to that, you know, they're going to see how is mom handling when things are difficult and when things are hard and when she loses somebody that she loves and it's not clear how or why.
I would agree that resiliency and adaptation is a hallmark of our existence. And we have intergenerational trauma that sticks with us because we've lost so many people because of disease. We lost people because of warfare. And people sometimes identify that our laughter is inappropriate, but it's something that we use as a coping mechanism, and it actually builds a stronger kinship. During this pandemic, when we lose somebody, they become your older sister. I lost an older sister who's from Yakima, who was on my staff when I ran the Salmon Corps program. And there's the day doesn't go by that we don't miss her deeply. And we can't talk to her name because a year has not passed. But we got together through Zoom, several of us, because we couldn't go and join the family for the funeral. But we told jokes and we told the good stories. The laughter is what helped us get through this very strong emotional time. Our sadness and our heart is still there. It will be there. But we use laughter a lot of times to help us cope.
That and your nerdy statistics. I like that we've got the combination of the nerdy statistics and the creative really coming together to balance us out some. Someone just asked, can you guys talk to the comparison between the percentage of people getting sick and dying within tribal communities versus the stats for Oregon and Washington in non-tribal communities?
So at least for us, we've been very, very fortunate. We've only lost 2 tribal members to death, and actually one of them lived on the Yakama Nation. The other lived here on the Umatilla Reservation. We've only had about 87 people out of 3,100 tribal members actually contract the disease, mostly because we believe we still are doing pretty much shelter in place, those restrictions. But for many tribes, such as the Navajo Nation, which was devastated by this, Yakama Nation, Warm Springs in Elizabeth's opening, where on that particular day, they finally had nobody popping positive for this, has been extremely devastating. And it just really depends on topography, population, density, all of those things in how urban planning. I'll go back to being one as a planner. It comes down to urban planning and how dense is your population and how close are your homes? What does your community look like? And Can you safely go into the store? As Emily said, she hasn't been able to go down to the store very often, a local store. We actually shut our store for the longest time, and people had to call in their orders and come up to a pay window in order to get stuff from the local store. But our community store, Mission Market, is a hub. It's used to where people constantly pass each other, give each other, see your relatives, give the latest news. And people are actually missing that. We ended up opening the store back up with a lot of restrictions. But our numbers and statistics are based because, again, it's that communal aspect, that kinship feeling that we want to have. But again, we're asking people to be selfless and not selfish in that manner by being able to spend more time with your immediate family to protect your loved ones. So
one of the things that you did in Umatilla, at least as far as I know, Chuck, was that Umatilla sort of got out in front of things pretty early on. And then there was an uptick at some point where I think the governor asked you to go back down, or maybe go, to a different level of safety. And at that point, it sounded like, if I understand correctly, the tribe banded together with a lot of local counties to do a much larger campaign. Can you talk to us about how that came about and why it was able to happen? Because it sounds complicated bringing all those different players together.
It was very complicated. So we're not beholden to the state government at all as a sovereign. And the state was issuing the county of Umatilla to go back a phase, well, actually to baseline, 2 phases back. And that, of course, affects us because we're their neighbors. Chairman Brigham, Cat Brigham, was very upset by this, as were the members of the Board of Trustees for the tribe. But she led the effort and demanded to hold a meeting by calling State Senator Bill Hansel to invite all the county commissioners, the leaders of the local municipalities in the county of Umatilla, the hospital directors, all together through a Zoom and a limited in-person meeting, and laid it out there that they needed to work together. That they needed to have an emergency operating plan. We were shocked to find out that Umatilla County, actually, their excuse for not standing up an incident command is that they didn't have in their manual anything for a pandemic. And so they relied on county health and the hospitals to kind of run it. Well, they weren't developed to have a unified emergency operating center. And so like the state did. And so we forced that to make that happen by forming this coalition, really working around educating. We still live in the West, where it is the myth that the rugged individual, don't tell me what to do, lives on. People who came out here from the East and the immigrant didn't do so on their own. They didn't come out here on individual train wagons. They came out here with hundreds of train wagons because they had to rely on their neighbors and their friends to get them here safely. They started their farms and ranches because of community. But yet this idea that the rugged individual is out here, you can't tell me to wear a mask, it lives very well here in Umatilla County. I was just at Les Schwab's getting new tires yesterday, and half the people were refusing to wear masks. And as of today, there's a new mandate, regardless of public or private businesses, you have to force mask wearing. I can't believe that people don't understand that by me wearing a mask is not only protecting me, it's protecting me from you, but you wearing a mask protects you from me. It should not be that complicated until we get a vaccine.
Emily, I want to take a moment and have you and Chuck as well, if you'd like, talk about the All in Washington campaign and what's going on. Part of this conversation, what we're doing tonight, is to share your stories with people who may not know them, and the information that you have with people who may not know them, and that includes non-tribal members. But I also want to make sure that resources that would be useful for tribal members in particular get shared. And this is one of them here that Erica just put on the screen for us. Emily, do you mind talking just briefly about what this is?
Yeah, so this is a COVID response grant that's available for tribes in the state of Washington, federally recognized and state recognized. And it basically is a level of direct support that tribes would be able to give direct to individuals in their tribe. And a lot of different people have put into this fund and fundraised, different musicians, the Seahawks, Governor Inslee. And I think because there's so much of a partnership, nobody wanted to really, it's a group aggregate fund, is the fancy word. And so it's under this umbrella term of All in Washington. But like we talked about, there's such a distrust from tribes, and we have so many different people bringing in so much different information. When you have to make real-time decisions at a rapid pace, it's not always clear, like, hey, this is a legit thing. This isn't a fake thing. We're trying to give you money. And to have this problem now where we're trying to get tribes to apply, it's actually an okay problem to have in light of everything. But that's as simple as it is. You know, COVID response funds resources are available. Application is online and they're due November 13th.
And that application should come from individual tribal members or leaders of certain groups within the tribes?
From the tribe or tribal organizations.
Okay. So you heard it from Emily. It's all in Washington. We are going to make sure that we put the information for All in Washington, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation COVID info website, and also the Yellowhawk.org. All that information we will put on our website, and I know it's also available out there already, but we'll just gather it together. So if you've watched this and you want to remember what they talked about, please go there. And then also spread the word. We've had over 100 people tuning in tonight, and that is awesome. We'll be recording this and sharing it, and that is great. But I think one of the best ways to help educate and connect and share what we learn is just by word of mouth. So even if it's on the phone or a Zoom call, I hope you help share what Emily and Chuck shared with us tonight. And I want to say thank you. Go eat your celery, Emily. Chuck, go get nerdy. It's really helping out a lot of us. I'm going to say goodbye to you two both. Thank you so much for your time. And if you are attending here, I'm going to say a few more things just before I wrap things up. First of all, thank you to Erica Bingham. She is the lady behind the scenes. She's the one pushing buttons and has helped make this all happen. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating. I want to quickly let you know that tonight was also part of a partnership with confluence.org, a great organization. They helped convince Emily and Chuck that we should all get together and do this, which feels great right now because coming together is hard, but darn if it's not what we need right now. So thank you, Confluence. I've got 3 important things before you go. Number 1, register for this next Sense of Place. I guarantee you it will be the only place you will ever find a vegan holiday roast, a misfit entrepreneur, and our own Klickitat County all in one place. Seth Tibbett, the founder of Tofurkey, is joining us this next month, and maybe you'll want to have Tofurkey for Thanksgiving. We'll see. After you've registered, I want you to go write a letter. We're going to give you the information on how. The Dear Neighbor Project is, you'll be hearing more about it in the future, and you may even be hearing from some of your neighbors. Emily and Chuck, you guys should help us share the word here of this as well. Right now, though, go check out the website and you'll get more information about Dear Neighbor. And I hope that you'll be inspired to write a letter, because I think you might be surprised about how good it makes you feel, and you deserve that right now. So tell your book clubs, tell your church, get those kids that are at home doing online schooling, get a pencil in their hand and think about writing a letter. You'll see what it's all about if you go to the website. And the last thing is I want to say to those of you who were able to donate to be a part of this show tonight, I really appreciate it. If you registered and couldn't figure out how to donate, but just thought, man, I want to give some of this money that's burning a hole in my pocket to a good cause, I hope that you will consider logging on and sharing some of it with us, because we have a great season lined up. I am so pumped. I am so excited about who we're going to get to hear from in the coming months. And your support truly, truly makes it happen. So thank you for those of us who have contributed. Thank you to those of you who will do so in the future. I think that's it. I hope you all have a great evening, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.